So if you are watching, so I'm starting a minute earlier, so I have time to say hello to you if you're watching us live. So if you're watching us online, on Facebook, on Chabad.org, or on my page, hello, ladies. I want to have a chance not just to say hello to those of the crowd here in the room. I want to say hello to you too. But if you're watching me online, say hi. You see me, Kim? Want to chat? Let's see if it's working. Who's watching us? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Yeah, there's a source sheet anyway. Wait, I'm sure during. Hello, Kim. I just had a throat lozenge or a Ricola and just okay. Just spilled out. Okay, if you're watching us on Chabad.org, please say hi so I can see you and I can acknowledge you and greet you from wherever in the world you're watching us. If you're watching my personal page, same goes if you're watching, especially if you're not local. Say hi. How are you, David? I have to respond to your text message after class. I meant to call you. The answer is yes, but I want to ask you something in return. I mean, the answer is obviously yes, but I want to ask you something. So afterwards, you saw we're doing the Spark Space. You saw the new program we're doing for called Sparks. You see the new program we're doing, Spark Space? No. So I'm gonna okay. So I'll tell you afterwards. Okay. Hello, Gail. I'm glad you're watching us. How are you feeling? I hope you're healthy. I hope you're good. Everyone's Baruch Hashem. If you're watching on Chabad.org, comments will appear here. I don't see any comments yet. So if you're watching, say hi. Jessica's on. I look forward to this class all week. Hi from Pennsylvania. Jessica, thank you for those beautiful, beautiful words. You me energized. Okay. Ready, my friends? Go ahead, get some water. Robert, you ready? You're ready. Bruce is ready. Rick, you ready? On your marks, go. Okay. Saul, good evening. Good evening, Shlomo. Good evening, Devorah. Good evening, Sadel. Good evening, Esther. Good evening, David. And good evening to Rajit who's watching us online. Good evening, Corinne watching us online. Good evening, Gail. And good evening, Jessica. And good evening, Michael, I guess. And good evening, Joe from Olympia, Washington State. Glad to have you all with us. So, what? I was working my way, but yeah, I didn't see you before. Special shout out to Michael. Okay. Okay. So, my friend, let us begin. We're going to learn a fascinating mission. I want to share with you such powerful stories. Some of them, some of you have probably heard, but they're powerful. Especially, we're coming off the saddest day of the year. Today is the day after Tisha B'Av, the day after the morning of the destruction of the temple. So the themes of the destruction of the temple and of the survival of the Jewish people, despite our exile and despite our being banished from our homeland, are still very much in my mind as we prepare for this class. So let us talk about a very, very interesting Mishnah. It is, if you have your sheets in front of you, if you're watching on a personal page, we get straight into it because we don't have time for jokes tonight because I have some of these. It's all going to be all stories tonight. It's going to be fascinating. History, stories, it's going to be fascinating. A Mishnah 8 of chapter 2 of Pirkei Avos. I know we skipped last week because we did class on the base of Mikdash, so I'm a week behind going through. So chapter 2, Mishnah 8. This is only the beginning of the Mishnah, but it's more than enough for us. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Kibel mehillel umishamai. Yochanan ben Zakkai received the oral tradition from his teachers. Who were his teachers? Hillel and Shammai, two very, very great sages. If you heard of them, that's great. If you didn't, you're missing out, but not tonight. Hu haya omer, he used to say. Here is a statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And remember, whenever it says he used to say, means not just something he's quoted one time as having said, it's a statement by which he lived. It's a statement that was a defining statement of his. This is something he always would talk about. He said as follows: Im lamadita Torah harbe. if you studied much Torah, al tachzik tova la'atzmach, do not give yourself credit. Do not claim credit for yourself. Why not? Because for such a purpose were you created. So simply, what is the Mishnah saying? On a simple, basic level, the Mishnah is making a very simple but obvious, important point. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a tremendous scholar. He was the head of the yeshiva in Yavna. I'll talk about that soon. He was one of the greatest sages, the head of the academy. And when you're in the world of academia, you know what happens, sadly, to academics sometimes? They're in the cloud. They're in two clouds. They're in an abstract cloud of the theory, and they're also in the cloud of their own self-importance and their own self-worth and their own self-greatness, which is understandable. It's not a criticism per se. It's almost normal human behavior that when you think highly of yourself and when you're worked hard to achieve greatness and you've studied for many, many years, etc., so you begin to feel very good about yourself, right? It's normal. So comes along Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he says, even if you studied a lot of Torah, you studied for many years, you became a big rabbi with a big congregation, a lot of deep ideas, and you've really, really worked on, developing yourself, don't give yourself too much credit. Don't get too carried away with yourself. Why? Because that was your whole purpose in the creation. God created you to study Torah. God created you to work and to accomplish. So what are you so excited about? You did what you were supposed to do. Is that a greatness? It's like this guy walking on the bridge, and he goes to the guy next to me, he pushes him into the bridge, and he catches him. Says, you should thank me, I just saved your life. I just saved your life. Say thank you. You don't get credit for not hitting somebody, right? You don't get credit. I'm not a good husband because I didn't hit my wife today. I'm saying that doesn't make you a good husband or a good person because you didn't steal something. That's not, look at me, I'm so ethical, I didn't steal. That doesn't make you a good person. That's what you're supposed to behave. That's the default setting. Good is when you go out of your way and you do something extra that you weren't required to do, you weren't obligated to do, and you still went to go take time and to go do a favor and to go visit someone and to go make a phone call, and you went out of your way to do it. Oh, now you did something good. Now you deserve credit. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying, studying Torah is not like going out of your way to do something special. You don't get credit for breathing. You don't get credit for being nice, not hitting someone. In God's world, you don't get credit for studying Torah. That's your purpose. That's the baseline. That's not look at me, I'm so righteous. I even study. I went to class for an hour. Going to class for an hour, sadly today, that's considered the guys, all of you sitting here, and the guys watching online, you're like the educated Jews, you're right on a high level, you're considered good, and you get credit for it. But really, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying, don't feel so good about yourself. This is what you exist for. God made you to study, so you're just doing what God wanted you to do. That's the Mishnah. That's how the commentaries explain it. However, of course, there's going to be questions on such a Mishnah. Not getting too complicated, too complex, and too detailed, but just very simply. If the objective of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was to tell us to be humble, he could have said it much cleaner and much more forcefully. This is actually another Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, Ma'od havishval ruach, which means very much be of low spirit, be humble. Don't judge someone else till you're in their place. Few things, there's many Mishnahs and many ways of saying don't have an ego. Don't think that you're so great because you study Torah. It's a little bit backwards. Like, there's another question. If you study Torah, a lot of Torah, don't feel proud of yourself because that's why you created. Just say, even though you studied, be humble. Simple. And by the way, the word if is also very strange. If you studied a lot of Torah, what do you mean if? You're supposed to study Torah. By the way, what does a lot of Torah mean? How much Torah is a lot of Torah? It's infinite, exactly, Devorah. Very good. Torah is infinite. Right? At what point do you say, I have a lot? When it comes to Torah, when it comes to money, clothing, shoes, at some point you say, my closet is full, right? I have a lot of shoes. Even that's relative. Your husband will say after 5 pairs of shoes, it's already a lot. And you'll say after 50 pairs, it's a lot. I don't know. Right? It's relative. I got it. But there's still some finite number. When it comes to Torah, what does Torah harbe mean? What does a lot of Torah mean? Torah is, the rabbis tell us, the Torah is wider than the biggest sea, deeper than the deepest ocean. There's no end. Like when you look at the horizon of the ocean, can't see an end. There is an end, but we just don't see it. Torah is like that, but for real, you can't see the end, and you can't see the depth. There's no depth when you go to the ocean. How much deeper does it go? It goes. Today we were measuring it, but it goes. There's no limit to the depth. So what does it mean? If you happen to study a lot of Torah, and a little Torah, then you should feel good. Like, what's a lot of Torah? The whole. So it's strange that this should be a teaching just to teach us to have humility. It's a very strange way of saying to be humble, right? And it's like studying a lot of Torah. Don't be so excited. That's what you were created for. And finally, what does this have to do with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he's such a great sage. He told us, don't be proud of yourself that you behaved in class and you studied Torah. So let us know a little bit, if you know the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which, as I promised you already, is a fascinating story. Fascinating story. If you know his story and you know what he did for the Jewish people and you'd understand the reality of his life, you'll appreciate why this is the statement that is being quoted as a statement he often said. Okay? Now, we just came. I've said this story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai before, but the way I'm going to say it tonight is in a unique twist that I only recently heard from another rabbi, Rabbi Kesselman, and as a unique contrast to that makes it much more powerful that I've never, in my own mind, had before. We're coming from Tisha B'Av, as I said. We're coming from the day when the temple, not once, but twice, was destroyed. The first temple, in the year 468 BC, whatever the exact year is, it was destroyed for 70 years. The Jews were in exile. The Jews came back with Ezra the scribe. They built a second temple. And then in the year 70 CE, or 70 AD, the temple was destroyed again by the Romans, by a general called Titus. Okay? Tremendous amount of stories and details. What I want to talk about for a second, for all of you who are watching, is what was the feeling of the sages, of the rabbis, who knew that the temple was going to be destroyed? Who knew the temple was going to be destroyed. And the rabbis knew the temple would be destroyed because they were afraid. And actually, it's more Gemara to quote, and I don't want to get too lost in this part of the story because I'll never ever finish tonight. But if you know the political wars that was going on between the Jews, the tremendous division, the tremendous animosity even between the different camps of the more statesmen, scholars who are more diplomatic and more level-headed and more calm, who said we cannot win against the Romans. Our only hope is to surrender, to accept them as the rulers over the land of Israel, the land of Judea, and then they'll let us live in peace. We'll have to pay them taxes. We'll have to accept their governor as our ruler, but we'll be able to keep the temple. We'll be able to continue doing Torah, mitzvot, etc. And then you had the young, more hot-headed, more passionate zealots called the Brionim. There were different camps. I'm being very general right now, who believed we got to fight for our homeland. And we can't allow the Romans to invade. The Romans had already invaded. The Romans had already been controlling the land, and the governors were so wicked and so ruthless that they had caused the Jews to rebel against them. And they said, we can't allow the Romans to do whatever they want. This is our land. And even though they're a stronger army, it's the Roman Empire. And what was a Jewish army compared to the Roman Empire? And so even though we have no chance militarily, even though the numbers are not in our favor, don't you remember the Maccabees? Don't you remember the Maccabees fought against the Greek Empire and they won? So we know that we don't have a chance militarily, but that doesn't stop us. That doesn't scare us. We're going to do everything we can to fight for our independence. And we're going to, do or die, risk it all. And they went full in and they fought against the Jews. They did not want the Jews, the rabbis, to surrender, to make peace with the Romans. They did everything they could to force the Jewish people to fight, including burning down. There was such bad famine at the time. There was tremendous storage houses of food in Jerusalem. I'm getting distracted and I didn't want to, but in Jerusalem there was tremendous warehouses of food, of oil, of flour. And they realized that as long as the Jews had food, they wouldn't be desperate enough to fight because they didn't want to fight the Romans. The Romans weren't looking to destroy Israel, just to put it into context. All the Romans wanted to do was just to squash their revolution, to get them to re-accept the rule of the empire over them, appoint a Roman governor to take taxes and all that, and they would have let the Jews continue being Jews. It wasn't an anti-Semitic at that point. They would come later. The Romans would become very ruthless to the Jews afterwards, where they would do everything they could to destroy any form of Judaism. But at this point, the war wasn't against Judaism, it was against the revolution of the Jewish army, of the Jewish people in Israel, in Judea. And at that point, the temple, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai escaped, and he was able to go to Vespasian. I'm going to get to that story soon. But before I get to that story, I mean, that's what I just said. The zealots destroyed the food in Jerusalem to fight, force Jews to fight. That's exactly right. That was the famine. And there's so many more details here. Like, there's so much more that I want to say, but I'm not going to, because that's not what I was planning on teaching tonight. So I don't want to get distracted. What I want to show you is what was the mood of the rabbis at this time. What was the morale of the Jewish people like? Before the temple was destroyed, after the temple was destroyed. So if you look in the Gemara, I have on the sheets in front of you, there's a quote from the Gemara in Baba Basra, page 60, side 2. It is taught that Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha said, from the day that the temple was destroyed, by law, by right, we should decree upon ourselves not to eat meat and not to drink wine. But the sages do not issue a decree upon the public unless the majority of the public is able to abide by it. So really, since the temple had been destroyed, the rabbis were in such a state of mourning, they felt that the Jews were so destroyed by having lost our temple, that really there should be a law, you are not allowed to eat meat ever again, except for Shabbat, maybe in holidays. But on a regular Tuesday, eat meat, drink wine, only happy people do that. And the Jews are not happy. We're in a state of mourning, permanent mourning. And from the day the wicked kingdom, meaning Rome, spread, who decreed evil and harsh decrees upon us, and nullified Torah and mitzvot for us, and do not allow us to enter the covenant for a son, meaning the circumcision, the bris. By right, by law, we should each agree upon ourselves not to marry a woman and not to produce offspring. And it will turn out that the descendants of Abraham, our forefather, will cease to exist on their own. Do you understand what an intense statement that is? Terrible. But leave the Jews alone. It is better that they be unwitting sinners and not be intentional wrongdoers. Meaning, let me explain what this Gemara is saying. Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya is saying, Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha is saying, that really the Jews are in such a state of mourning. Our temple being destroyed has been such a national calamity that never again for Jewish history should a Jew feel a sense of happiness to eat meat, to drink wine. In fact, that's the beginning, after the destruction. Then when it got worse, and when the decrees of the Romans came upon the Jewish people, stopping them from celebrating the Jewish holidays, stopping them from allowing their children to have a bris, stopping them from celebrating the learning Torah and doing mitzvot, the rabbi said, really, we should allow the Jewish people to die out. We should make a decree that no man and woman ever get married again. And no one should have children. And if that will happen, we won't go and actively kill the Jewish people. We're not going to go and commit national suicide, but we'll stop the continuation of the Jewish people, because better for the Jews to stop having kids than to have kids that won't be circumcised, and to have kids that won't study Torah, and to have kids that won't keep Shabbos. And in their minds, it was so bad what could happen because of the decree of the Romans. They said, better the Jews should die out. Why did they not make the decree? Only because the Jews wouldn't have obeyed it. You can't make a decree that the Jews won't listen to. So if you make a rule that you cannot let them marry and you get married anyway, now you're a sinner. If you didn't make the rule, then you haven't broken the rule. So in order not to make the Jews sinners, because the Jews wouldn't listen to the rule anyway, and the Jews wouldn't not get married, so they didn't make the law. But really, if you want to understand the mindset of the people, the sages, the rabbis at that time, they were in a state of we are finished. We as a nation are over. We cannot survive in exile. And I want to put this into historical context. After the first temple was destroyed, the Jewish people were taken into exile into Babylonia. Story of Purim, Persia. How long were the Jews in exile for? 70 years. 70 years from when the temple was destroyed till Ezra the scribe was allowed to go back under the rule of Darius, Dayavish, the son of Esther, Jewish king, to rebuild the temple. When the Jews went back after 70 years, how many Jews went back with him? You know? A few thousand. Out of the hundreds of thousands of Jews that lived in Persia, the vast majority of Jews had no interest in going back to Israel. The vast majority of Jews did not have an interest in going back. Ezra went. They were so poor, the Jews, that when they built the second temple, they built it out of wood. No gold, no gems, no precious stones, nothing. Wood. It was a wooden building. The Jews that went back were the, so to say, the poor, unsuccessful Jews. They didn't have much going on for them in Persia. So they went back with Ezra the scribe. And even those Jews, many of them were intermarried. As when he got there, he had to separate the people who were married to Jews to non-Jews. The intermarriage was terrible. The Jews in the story of Purim were deeply, deeply assimilated into Persian society. So much so, they weren't keeping kosher. They went to the feast of Achashverosh. And that wasn't even 70 years. So imagine when the first temple was destroyed, and we had a clear prophecy that how long is the temple going to be destroyed for? 70 years. We knew that in 70 years we'll return to our land. The Jews knew it. Belshazzar knew it. He made a feast, right? When he thought the 70 years were up. Achashverosh knew it. That's why he made a feast. So everyone knew it's a 70-year exile. And yet in 70 years, look what an emotional and spiritual destruction the Jewish people faced. Think about it. In 70 years, we went from the nation of Israel surrounded by a temple and all that to being assimilated, integrated to society, intermarried. We were spiritually in a very dark place in the story of Purim. And even after the story of Purim, there's a little bit of like a high. The Jews didn't convert. They didn't, but they were still deeply, they like Jews in America today, or Jews in Germany, etc. So the rabbis who are living at the time of the destruction of the second temple are thinking we're going to go into an exile with no end date. There's no 70-year prophecy after the second temple. We're going to exile for an endless period of time. If they would have known 2,000 years, they would have had heart attacks on the spot. But they knew they're going to exile for an unspecified time, to be scattered all over, to a nation that would treat them much worse than the Babylonians did. The Persians were nice to us, so to say. They were not. The Romans were ruthless. The Romans were evil, evil people. Just again, I don't get carried away in history, but the slaves, you know how many Jews were taking as slaves into Roman ships and Roman galleys? So that the price of a Jewish slave was like pennies on the market. The Romans took so many slaves. The destruction of the Romans committed such murder, the streets of Jerusalem were flowing with blood like a river. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed in the 3-week period when they breached the wall. The murder that they did was tremendous. That's why the Jews fought against them. The Jews fought because they were ruthless, evil, brutal dictatorship. And it was much worse later after the destruction of our Kochbo, and it was very, very dark times. So if in Persia we suffered so much, we barely came back after 70 years, we lost so much of our identity. Can you imagine what's going to happen to the Jewish people in a 2,000-year exile? Can you imagine what happened to the Jewish people for scattered without a temple, without a high priest, without a Yom Kippur and the Holy of Holies and the incense and the menorah and the altar how will we survive? And indeed, many of the rabbis felt we have no hope. We can't survive. Better the Jews should stop having babies and become exiled nation who will end up sinning anyway. You understand? In this group of rabbis, we find Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is living at this time. He's one of these rabbis. What? I don't know Besdom. They're not Besdom. They're just in a state of despair and depression. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is another Gemara where he actually told the doors of the Beis Hamikdash, the doors used to open on their own. And these miracles, and they stopped doing it. And he said to the wall doors, "Why are you afraid? Why are you scaring yourself early? I know that you'll be destroyed, but not yet." Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew the temple would be destroyed. He saw the writing on the wall. He knew that if the Jews are not going to stop the revolution against the Romans will destroy the city of Jerusalem and destroy the temple. Which brings us now to one of the most famous stories in the Talmud. A beautiful story. It's a very long story. I just put a little part of it in the text that I want to read, but I'll tell you the whole story outside. Basically, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wanted to go surrender to the Romans to make some kind of peace treaty. He couldn't get out of the city because although the temple, which is in the inner part of Jerusalem, was controlled by the rabbis, the walls of the city were controlled by the Biroinim, by these zealots that wouldn't let the Jews out. They were both keeping the Romans out and keeping the Jews from going out. They were blocking both ways. There was multiple layers of a siege going on over here. And again, there's a lot more details. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai called his nephew, I forgot his name by heart, who was one of the leaders of the Biroinim, of these zealots. And he said to his nephew, I need you to help me sneak out of the city. So his nephew, even though he was from the opposite camp, respected his uncle, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He made a plan. They put him into a coffin as if he had... First, they made a rumor that he's very sick. That's what I'm going to say right now. So first they said a rumor he's very sick. And for 2-3 days, putting out the WhatsApp messages, urgent, Tehillim for, Yochanan, I don't know his mother's name, whatever. Say Tehillim, right? WhatsApp messages on the walls, on the bulletins. They put the things, everyone to pray to him. And after 2 days, they said he passed away. A big crowd went out there. Yochanan ben Zakkai passed away. They put him into a coffin. And only his closest students that knew that he wasn't really dead were in on the secret. And they go to carry him out of the city. Because by law, you can't bury someone in the actual city of Jerusalem. So the only way that the zealots would let someone out of the city was if they were dead to be buried. So okay, with the Yochanan ben Zakkai, they want to bring him out. And the guards, the zealots that were guarding on the inside of the walls, before the Romans on the outside of the walls, wanted to stab the coffin to make sure he was really dead. They didn't believe him. So he wanted to open it. He says, it's not respectful. Jews don't open the coffin. So he wanted to stick coffin and spears through. I said, don't do that. I said, well, what would the Romans say? They see that the Jewish rabbis coming out with spears going through the coffin. So they left it. They didn't put the spears, and he was able to get out. And he comes out of the city, officially to be buried. But once he's out of the city, he gets out of the coffin, and he comes before the general of the Roman camp, the Roman army, camped outside the walls of Jerusalem, whose name was Vespasian. Comes to Vespasian, and he's finally going to bring him to Vespasian. He says, peace unto you, my master, the king, the Caesar. So he says to him, I should put you to death. Because if I'm, first of all, you call me the Caesar when I'm not yet the king. I'm just a general. So that's an act of treason. And if I am the Caesar, why did you wait till now to come to me? I'm already putting the Jerusalem siege for 2 years or whatever, it was 18 months. It's a long time. I'm been camped out here in the sun, in the Israel heat, doing a siege. Why are you waiting to now to come to me, oh Caesar? And they start having a whole discussion about saving Jerusalem. That's not the Jews want to make a peace treaty, but the zealots won't let. So the Roman emperor says, when you have a snake in the barrel, you got to destroy the whole barrel. He should have said, you take tongues, whatever. The Gemara, there's a whole discussion that they had. And what he should have said about the tongues. And then, as they're talking, in walks a messenger. And the messenger says, peace unto you, O master, O king. The emperor of Rome has died. And the Roman Senate, whatever, voted. And you are now officially the new emperor of Rome. Exactly as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai just said a few minutes before. At that moment, the Vespasian had been in the middle of putting on his shoes. Or taking off his shoes. And one shoe was on and one shoe was off. And when he heard the news, he couldn't take the other shoe off. And he couldn't put the shoe that was off, he couldn't get it on. Something happened in that moment. And all of a sudden, his feet swelled. He couldn't get one shoe off, he couldn't get the other one on. So what should I do? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai quoted a verse to him that says that when you hear good news, it makes your bones fat. Shmua teva tedashin etzem is a verse. A good news makes your bones, gives you nachas. So that's why you heard such good news. You became the emperor. Your bones became bigger. So what should I do? He's stuck. You can't be the emperor with one shoe on, one shoe off. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, bring someone that you really don't like, that makes you nervous. Everyone has that guy that, bring someone that makes you upset. You'll see him, your shoes will get smaller again. So they bring in someone he doesn't like. He sees that guy. then his shoe came off. Anyway, by now, he's blown away with the brilliance of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai just went from being a Jewish rabbi to being like this, right? He just told him he's going to be the Roman emperor before he became the emperor, before he himself knew. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew because he knew that Jerusalem wouldn't fall, just FYI. How did he know? Because he knew that Jerusalem wouldn't fall to a regular general. It would only fall to someone who had been given kingdom by God. So he had a verse to prove what the emperor himself didn't know yet. They helped him take his shoes on, take his shoes off. So here we come to the part of the story I want to share with you. This is the end already of the story. At that moment, we're over here, Talmud Gittin, 56b. Vespasian, the very bottom of the page. Vespasian then said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I will be going to Rome, and I will send someone else in my place. But before I leave, ask something of me that I can give you. Stop, don't turn the page. Before I turn the page. What do you think he's going to ask for? Imagine this moment, okay? Before, I want you to understand the weight of the moment. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has come to beg the king to save Jerusalem, so whatever he's coming for. Let's see what he's coming for. However good his meeting could have gone, it was better, right? You go to a meeting and you're not sure how it's going to go, and then beyond your wildest dreams. You were there, you call the emperor, the guy comes in while you're there, says, you're the emperor, he can't get his shoes off, you help him get his shoes off, you're a hero. Like you're riding high, and he says to you, ask me anything you want. Okay. He says, ask something of me. In Hebrew, he said, in Aramaic, ask from my hand something that I can give to you. Freedom. Kill the zealots. Freedom. What do you say? I'm looking at the chat for a second. What do you think you will say? Well, let me see this. Don't burn down the temple. You think Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, don't burn the temple, save Jerusalem. Let me escape. I don't think he'd want to seek whatever. Let me escape. What does he ask for? He asks for three things. Ready, my friends? He's going to ask for three things now from the king. What does he ask for? He asks Mindy, of course, she already knows the story. He asks for three things. Number one, which I'm going to talk about last, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, give me Yavne and its sages. Number two, spare the dynasty of Rabbi Gamliel. And number three, give me doctors to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Let me explain these backwards. Rabbi Tzadok was a very, very, very holy sage who had been fasting and praying that the temple should not be destroyed. Every single day for the last 2 years or whatever was of the siege, he had fasted. And he had become so physically weak from fasting so many days that he was on death's door, and he wanted a doctor to come and heal him, that he should revive him. Number two, the family of Rabbi Gamliel was the leader of the Jewish people, is descendants of King David. Mashiach comes from the descendants of King David. So spare the family of the kings, the Jewish leaders of Rabbi Gamliel. And the first thing he asks for, the most important thing he asks for, is give me the city of Yavne and its sages. In Hebrew, these are famous words. Ten li Yavna v'chachamea. Give me Yavne and the sages that learned there. Meaning Jerusalem was a center of spiritual epicenter of the Jewish people, where the temple was. But it was in a city in the north of Israel, in the Galilee, in the mountains or somewhere. A city called Yavne. You can go there till today, and there's historical, archaeological sites. Give me that the city of Yavne will not be touched by the Roman army, and all the rabbis and the sages that are learning over there will be allowed to continue to learn in peace. He doesn't ask for Jerusalem to be saved. He doesn't ask for the temple to be saved. He doesn't ask for the high priest to be saved. Many of the rabbis thought that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lost his mind. They thought that you had a golden opportunity and you messed it up, to say it nicely. You messed up big time. Let's continue reading the Gemara for a second. We'll go back and look at what the rabbi said. The rabbi said about Rabbi Akiva, says, the famous Rabbi Akiva, says about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yosef, and some say it was Rabbi Akiva, who apply the verse to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that says, I am the Lord who turns wise men backward and makes their knowledge foolish. And he should have said to them, leave the Jews alone at this time. He could have asked to save the Jewish people. He didn't. Now, the Gemara continues, and I didn't bring it because that's not my point. Rabbi Yochanan answered, if you ask for too much, you get nothing. Which is a very rule. You got to, not to be greedy. I would have asked for Jerusalem. That was a whole siege. I would have gotten nothing. At least I got, anyway. But that's not important. What's important is to recognize that some of the great sages, like Rabbi Akiva, could not understand how Judaism would survive without the temple. And if you have the chance to ask the king to leave the temple alone, even though it's a crazy request, even though it seems like you're asking for everything, I mean, you are. You're basically saying, like, stop the siege and go take your whole army home with you. That's basically what that request would be. It's not a normal request to ask. But that's the only request in there on the Jew can ask for, because without a temple, we're destroyed. Which is why, by the way, Rabbi Akiva is the one who was a tremendous scholar. Rabbi Akiva was a tremendous, tremendous scholar. But Rabbi Akiva was the one that when he saw an opportunity to fight against the Romans again with Bar Kochba, what does he do? He throws his full support behind Bar Kochba, he calls him Mashiach, etc., etc. In Rabbi Akiva's mind, the only future for the Jewish people is a temple, a spiritual epicenter. That's what all the rabbis thought. The majority of the rabbis felt that without the temple, the Jews cannot survive. Yochanan ben Zakkai was an unbelievable visionary. Unbelievable. And he was able to see how, as long as we have the sages of the Torah studying Torah, we have the city of Yavne and its sages, we have Torah amongst the Jewish people, Judaism can survive without the temple. Judaism can survive in exile. It can survive. And that's why of all the sages, the one who is credited with saving Judaism is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. There's a few throughout the course of history that are credited being pivotal leaders. Rabbi, who wrote Mishnayos down. Our Rabbi after the Holocaust. There's a few people in history, the Rambam, that are like not just great scholars. They were pivotal at crucial moments of history to keep Judaism going. And at the moment of the destruction of the temple, the one that would keep Judaism alive, to ensure that we could survive in a versatile, transitional, exile format without a temple, was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. We need him now. So, my friend, now that you know who Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is, now you know a little bit about his history, you understand how much he values the importance of learning Torah. This was a person who never for 1 second stopped teaching Torah. It says about him, he never, ever, ever stopped teaching. He lived till 120 years old, and he taught Torah until he was 120 years old. He didn't have a retirement party at 65 and said, look at me, I taught for 40 years, and have all of his students come and say some nice things about him. Till 120 years old, he never stopped teaching. Never stopped teaching. Now, there's more to say about him. I want to go towards the end of his life. And then we're going to be able to go back to the Mishnah. So I want to read you one more story in the Gemara. And this is a powerful story, especially I can tell you about the Rebbe in a minute. This Gemara from the Gemara in Brachas. The Gemara in Brachas, page 28b, tells us that when Yochanan ben Zakkai fell ill, his students entered to visit him. And when he saw his students, he began to cry. His students said to him, Lamp of Israel, the right pillar, the mighty hammer. For what reason are you crying? All those expressions are expressions of not just being a great rabbi. The lamp of Israel means that you're a teacher, that you're shining the light of Torah to the world. But the right pillar means that you held up the Jewish people in the time of destruction. You were the one that kept us alive, that kept Judaism alive when the temple was destroyed. The mighty hammer, you kept us sustained, you kept us going. For what reason are you crying? Now, by the way, before I go further, and Rabbi asks this question, is it so hard to ask a person on their deathbed why they're crying? You go to visit a person about to die. And I've had, unfortunately, many conversations with people who are on their deathbed, including a woman who's Shiva Hamazin today, who I spoke to her last week or a week before about death. Today, I went to visit a lady who's diagnosed with ALS. She knows she's going to do whatever. I'm saying she's willing a long time. Maybe the doctor will be wrong. She'll see a special. She'll have a full shlema. But the point is, you know you're going to die. Is it surprising to see such a person cry? Imagine you walk into someone's house, they're dying. They're on their deathbed. You say, why are you crying? What kind of question is that? Let's see what he answers. He says to them, my friends, he says to them, open it up, here we go. He says to them, if they were leading me before a flesh and blood king who is here today and in the grave tomorrow, meaning he's only a mortal human being that doesn't live forever. If he's angry with me, his anger is not eternal. Maybe he'll get angry at someone else tomorrow. I can bribe him. That's later on. If he incarcerates me, his incarceration is not an eternal incarceration. If he kills me, his killing is not for eternity. I'll live in the next world. Moreover, I'm able to appease him with words and bribe him with money. Even so, if I was going to be judged before a king of flesh and blood who was angry at me, even though I know that his anger is not forever, and his punishments are not forever, and his imprisonment is not forever, and I can bribe him, and I can appease him, and I can hire lawyers, and I can do stuff, would I not cry? Now that they are leading me before the supreme Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're leading me before the King, the supreme King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, who lives and endures forever and all time. If he is angry with me, his anger is eternal. If he incarcerates me, his incarceration is an eternal incarceration. If he kills me, his killing is for eternity. I am unable to appease him with words and bribe him with money. Moreover, I have but two paths before me. One of the Garden of Eden, and one of Gehenna, of hell, of purgatory. And I do not know, listen to these words, said by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and I do not know on which path they are leading me. Will I not cry? That's crazy. That's crazy. This is a man who never rested for a moment. The stories about him are tremendous. He literally single-handedly rebuilds Judaism after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. He is the one that is credited with rebuilding Torah Judaism after the temple was destroyed. You don't think you're going to heaven? You don't think you're guaranteed a red carpet with whatever the fireworks and the flashes and the confetti? He rebuilt Judaism. He created a whole yeshiva network, and he was the head of the yeshiva. And he taught, and he taught, and he taught, and he spent his entire life till his last day fighting for the Jewish people. And now he's crying because he doesn't know what way they're going to take him. If he's going to Gan Eden, or he's going to Gehenna. What kind of question is that? Says the Rebbe. The Rebbe said this idea several times. Not one time the Rebbe said this. But the first time the Rebbe taught this was on Parshas Mishpatim. It was in the winter of 1952. What happened in the winter of 1951? And what happened in the winter of 1951? Well, what happened in the winter of 1950? On Yud Shvat, in January of 1950, the previous Rebbe passed away. Right? For a full year, his son-in-law, the Rebbe, was being begged and encouraged by all of the followers, all the Chassidim, to formally assume the leadership of Chabad, and the Rebbe refused. He didn't want to do it. Finally, on the first yahrzeit of his father-in-law in January of 1951, the Rebbe accepted the leadership of Chabad. This Maimer was said on the Parsha of Mishpatim, which is sometime in the winter. I don't know exactly. I can tell you the exact date was, have it in front of me, was on the beginning of the month of Adar. So Shvat, literally a few weeks after the 1-year anniversary of him becoming the Rebbe, the winter of 1952. And the Rebbe said a Maimer called Leitim Shekela about not having a miscarriage and a barren woman and a barren woman. And in that Maimer, the Rebbe asks this question. The Rebbe quotes this Gemara. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who does not know on which way they are taking him, he doesn't know if he's going to go to heaven or to opposite. And how is that possible? Says the Rebbe, and put this into the context of a man that has been the leader of the Jewish world for just over a year. A job he didn't want. He wasn't an American politician who went spent 3 years campaigning and saying, choose me, choose me. He didn't want it. He was like, his arm was twisted into it. Says the Rebbe, that because of his great efforts, his great work, his great commitment and devotion to doing his job in the world, to teach Torah, to save the Jewish people, he had no time whatsoever to herin zich, to pay attention to his own level. He never had a free moment to think, where am I holding my own spiritual journey? Where am I holding my own love for God? He's so, azoy feel faryogit in Yiddish. I'm going, the words are translated, are put into parentheses here. He's so faryogit, like worked, so toiled, far-inked, like he's twisted, he's strained, far-trunken, and so sunken into doing his shlichus, his divine mission, each and every single day, each and every single hour, each and every single minute, that he has no idea what's happening with his own seichel, his own intellect, his own emotions, his own feelings of his midot, his feelings, his love for Hashem, his fear of Hashem, his ratzon, his tainug, his pleasure, he has no idea. Because he knows that at every single moment, he needs to be focused on doing what God needs him to do at that moment. And if even 1 minute passes where he's not doing what God wants of him at that minute, not just he's not reaching the ultimate level of spiritual perfection. He's murdered b'malchus. These are the words. He's rebelling against the king. He's going against his master. And as the Rebbe says these words, the Rebbe was crying so intensely, and it's a Shabbos Farbrengen, so it's not, the Rebbe was crying so intensely, and there were many times the Rebbe got emotional when he spoke. The Rebbe got emotional a lot of times. And there were times when the Rebbe got so emotional, he didn't just get emotional, he didn't just choke with emotion, where the Rebbe cried and you could see tears. Here was as far as the one time the Rebbe was crying so hard, he put his hands on the table, put his head down on his head on his hands, and was sobbing uncontrollably. Imagine the Rebbe, okay? If you puts his head on the table, and he's crying and sobbing, so much so he can't even keep his head up. Forget he can't speak. His head is down and he's sobbing. Why is he sobbing? Because now that he became responsible for world Jewry, he became responsible to teach all of those Jews throughout the entire world that have become lost and scattered and forgotten, so to say. He has no time to think about his own spiritual level. He has no time to ask himself, where am I holding? Not only that, he says, after he picked up his head, he said, he has no sense of satisfaction even. Because if you ask him, then inflect him, Vos is by dear, mitin, what is going on by you in your own heart, in your own land? He gives a shrai, he gives a shaiter, he screams with bitter soul. I have ratzon, I have desires, I have pleasures, I have love for Hashem, fear of Hashem. How can I think about myself when every single second I can only be doing what I was created for, to fulfill my shlichus, my divine purpose, my divine mission at that moment? That is what the Rebbe explains, is about the idea of filling days, that there's no barren days and miscarriages, where you create a day that doesn't produce anything. Barren days is empty days, that the whole day is useless, meaningless, wasted on Netflix and on whatever we did, where nothing meaningful, productive happened the whole day. Imagine a whole day of your life and nothing of purpose and meaning came out of it. Nothing. It's a nothingness of a day. That was every moment, every minute. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is lying on his deathbed, and the student sees crying. Why is he crying? Because for the last 80 years, 90 years, whatever it was, since the temple had been destroyed, I don't know how many years it was, he had not had a moment to think about himself. All he had been doing was thinking about how to rebuild Yiddishkeit by reteaching Torah outside of the natural spiritual oasis of the temple. How to teach Jews to feel for God outside of the natural environment of Jerusalem through intellectual learning of Torah. Now he's on his deathbed. Now he can't teach anymore. Now he knows he's going to heaven for the first time in years. He's thinking about himself. The first time today, that never happened in America. Every day, take care of me, spend time. How do I feel? How do I think? How do I want to feel? How did I feel? How did you make me feel? How will I feel if you make me feel? Right? We're very self-aware. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a man who had no sense of self. He never had a chance to think about himself. And that's why now on his deathbed, he's crying and saying, I don't know what will be with me. I haven't thought about my own spiritual status in so many years. All I've been doing is teaching Torah. This, my friends, and that, yes, that is the highest form of spiritual development. The highest form of spiritual development is we have absolutely no sense of self. As long as you're self-aware and there's still an I in the picture, that's not humble. And so, my friends, let's go back to the Mishnah. What's the statement that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was known by? He wasn't saying be humble. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wasn't humble per se. He was a revolutionary. He was a visionary. He wasn't telling people, feel low about yourself. Don't give yourself a credit. Don't give yourself a pat on the back. That's not what he was saying. He was saying, if you learned a lot of Torah, don't say, look at me, I'm successful. I accomplished something. It's not about you. This is why you were created. That's what the Mishnah. The whole reason why you exist is to teach Torah. And the fact you never said something beautiful, we can say it even more. What does it mean if you learned a lot of Torah? We said, is there a limit to how much Torah you can learn? No. So I learned a lot. In fact, the more you learn, the more you know how little you know. I can tell you, I know a lot. I know so little compared to what there is to know. I know very little. And the more you know, the more you recognize how insignificant your knowledge is. So what does it mean if you learned a lot? You know what it means? Look at the words. If you learned a lot, it's all comparisons, relative. Before I go to the words. A lot is a relative term. A lot is only in... Do you have a lot of money? Do you have a lot of money? I don't know. I don't want to say one in the room. Ask Joe, does he have a lot of money? Depends. Compared to a homeless guy, maybe he's a lot of money. Compared to Bill Gates, he's a beggar, right? So a lot of money is a very relative term. And a lot of people can have a lot of money and they'll think that they don't have a lot of money, even though many, many people think they have a lot of money. In comparison to them, they have a lot, but in their mind, compared to their role models and their, they don't have a lot. Torah, harbe, a lot of Torah is not an objective. You have a lot of Torah. There's no such a thing as having a lot of Torah. Torah is endless. You can never have a lot of it. It's only comparative. If there's someone that you know that in comparison to them, you have a lot of Torah, so in comparison to my neighbor, I know more than my neighbor, I've learned more than them, I have what to teach them and share with them, don't hold the Torah for yourself. Look at the words. It's a beautiful way of reading the words. If you read the Hebrew, it's better. So it says, Im lemadata Torah harbe, if you have learned in comparison to someone else a lot of Torah, you have a lot, meaning compared to them, so you have what to teach them. Al tachzik tova la'atzmacha. Translate that literally. Don't hold on to the good for yourself. We translate before, don't give yourself credit. Don't hold it as a credit to yourself or good for yourself. Translate literally. Al tachzik tova la'atzmacha. Don't hold on to the good for yourself. Don't keep it inside. Don't say, so I learned, I have a lot, it's good for me. You know why you know a lot? Do you know why God gave you the ability to know a lot in comparison to that person? So you can share it. Because that is the whole purpose for why you were created. You sharing Torah with someone else, not a plus. You were created to share Torah. You were created to be responsible for your friend, for your neighbor, for your sibling, for your coworker. You have a responsibility to him or to her. That's why you were created. And therefore, you have an obligation not to hold what you've gained, to hold it in for yourself. Share it. Inspire. That's why you were created. The Rebbe would tell people that every single person can be a shliach. Every person can be a teacher to someone else. And the Rebbe had a line that if you know Aleph, and you don't know Beis, you only learned the Aleph of the Aleph Beis. Now, you would think the Aleph of the Aleph Beis, what is the Aleph? I mean, it's one letter, but it's just one letter of 22 letters. But if you know Aleph and know someone that doesn't know Aleph, you know a lot of Torah compared to that person. That's Torah Harbe. That is a lot of Torah. If you don't even know Aleph and I know Aleph, so my Aleph is a lot compared to your zero. I don't mean you as in you, but I'm saying and that person's zero. And that's why you were created. You met this person. You're this person's neighbor. You're this person's gym, mat sharing, whatever, partner. You play mahjong with this person, not because you need a person to play mahjong with. You were created to share the Aleph that you know with the person that's no Aleph. And if you know Aleph and Beis and Gimel, then you got to teach Aleph and Beis and Gimel. You got to teach what you know. And this is what Yochanan and Zaka lived by. The way the Jewish people will survive in darkness, the way we'll survive in exile, is by learning Torah and by teaching Torah and by sharing Torah. And that is what made the Jewish people survive. And that was the greatness of Yochanan ben Zakkai. That there was never a moment he thought about himself. There was never a moment that, what did I accomplish? His whole entire existence was to find a way to keep on teaching, to keep on sharing with somebody else. And that was the mission he gave over to us, to be teachers of whatever we know. We may think it's a little bit because we've learned a little bit. So we know that we only know a little bit. But compared to someone else, it's a lot. Share what you have, because that's why you were created. Good night, my friends. Hope you all enjoyed. Laila Tov. Thank you all for the beautiful words. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Ordinate Wealth. Thank you. Ordinate Wisdom, yeah. Write that down. It's the Rebbe's line. It's the Rebbe's line. Thank you, Jessica, yes. Yeah, he had no choice. He understood. He has a mission. And after he took it, he was crying because there went his own personal spiritual service. So Rebbe was a very, very private person. He was also a very spiritual person. Rebbe would pray in a very private way without fanfare. He didn't want anyone to see. Once he became Rebbe, there was no. He gave him his own personal spirituality for the sake of the people. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Ravit. Thank you, Mindy. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Brother-in-law. Thank you, Lisa. I hope you're joining. Hello, Jeffrey. Love you too, my friends. Hello, Shalom. Erev Tov, Rika. Hope you're well. Hello, Carmen. We said hello to you. Hello, Harold, watching from Portland, Oregon. Hello, Debbie. Hello, Gail. Yes, I'll see you at San Bar Mitzvah. Yes, Devora. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, and Christine, and thank you, Lori, and Jessica, and Eugenia. Names and Celso. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Lori and Mara. Thank you, Christine, from watching from New York. Thank you, Stanley, and thank you, Joe, again. We saw you earlier, Joe, Jessica. Thank you, Mikael. Yes, tomorrow night, starting JLI. Yes, Journey of the Soul. Charge your card, and we have you absolutely. Yes, tomorrow.